You're already in prison. They just have not closed the prison cell door yet.
Renowned civil rights attorney Ben Crump calling out the school-to-prison pipeline. We're sitting down with Crump one-on-one about the lawsuit against city schools and the national impact it could have. Another teenager falls victim to gun violence in Baltimore days before the city is set to enforce its youth curfew. We're hearing from a former mayor about what she thinks needs to change to curb the youth crime.
Until he knows the full story, I don't want to hear nothing he has to say.
A war of words between Governor Wes Moore and a man protesting Maryland's newest gun law, why the protest has neighbors on edge, and how it could impact next year's legislative session.
Live from WBFF in Baltimore, this is Fox 45 News at 10.
Good evening, I'm Mackenzie Frost. Mary Bubala has the night off. Fox 45 News is examining the juvenile crime crisis as another teenager falls victim to gun violence. Police say a 15-year-old boy is recovering after he was shot in southeast Baltimore early this morning. He's one of 3 people shot this weekend. One of those victims died. Along with becoming victims of crime, we're also seeing a spike in juveniles accused of committing crimes, including carjackings and shootings. Nationally known civil rights attorney Ben Crump was in Baltimore City this weekend to deliver the commencement address at Morgan State University. I spoke with him about the struggling Baltimore City school system, the school-to-prison pipeline, and why he's so committed to a lawsuit that claims the city does not provide the quality education students are entitled to. Crime has a grip on Baltimore, a crisis facing the city for years, surpassing 300 homicides for the last 8 years in a row. And now, juveniles are the latest to find themselves in the crosshairs. The school-to-prison pipeline, according to nationally known civil rights attorney Ben Crump, is happening in Baltimore.
Without a quality education in American society today, you are a target for the school-to-prison pipeline. You're already in prison. They just have not closed the prison cell door yet. And that's why we have to give our children an education so they won't get caught up in prison.
And a quality education simply isn't reality for every public school student in the city. This lawsuit, filed on behalf of taxpayers by Giovanni and Shonda Patterson, alleged Baltimore City schools are misusing millions of tax dollars because some students just aren't getting the education they deserve. Is that happening in Baltimore City?
Well, I want to believe that the lawsuit is making everybody pay attention. Every day that we don't treat it like a crisis, we lose dozens and dozens of other children.
The lawsuit comes after a grade-changing scheme was uncovered by Fox 45's Project Baltimore, as well as inflated enrollment numbers. Since then, 23 schools in the city had 0 students who were tested proficient in math. Do you hope that the lawsuit in the city could potentially spark change beyond Baltimore City?
I'm banking on it. My time has been poor from every part of the country. And the reason I keep coming back to Baltimore is I believe Baltimore can be the key to the education crisis all across America.
Why do you say that?
Because if the citizens can make sure that we have accountability and productivity, then that could be a model for cities just like Baltimore and every state in America.
Is that
and our children would be the better for it.
Is that what's missing in the city? Is that accountability and productivity?
I think so, because when you look at any industry, it's about making sure there's accountability so you can see that the investments are getting the returns from the investments. You never know what these young people can do if given a quality education.
So many of Baltimore's youngest are falling through the cracks, getting left behind in the classroom, and in the latest crime trend, getting caught up in a life of violence.
People with a quality education are like birds. They can flap their wings and go anywhere to heights that nobody imagined. But first, they gotta have a quality education.
Imagine what Baltimore could be like if every student had those wings.
That's what drives me. I imagine Baltimore, I imagine cities all across America being able to give our children the fundamental building blocks to be successful, constructive citizens in American society.
You can find more on my interview with Ben Crump on our website right now at foxbaltimore.com. Many experts Fox 45 News has spoken with point to a failing school as a driving factor behind the juvenile crime crisis.
There is a direct correlation. I'm not going to say necessarily causation, but students are disconnected, and it has become even more prevalent.
Dr. David Heber is the co-founder of Concentric Educational Solutions, a group working with the city to stop youth crime. He says chronic absenteeism is a big problem driving juvenile violence, and the city school system, as well as families, need to work together to keep students engaged in the classroom. City Council is set to hold a hearing on that issue, but it's not exactly clear when. Meanwhile, former Mayor Sheila Dixon says it comes down to accountability, calling out state laws which make it difficult to charge juveniles with most crimes.
We've seen record numbers of juveniles either shot and injured or shot and killed. Why do you think juvenile crime is at an all-time high, and what's the solution to that?
Some of the juveniles know what the laws are, that they're not going to be penalized, but we have to begin to send a different message, that they will be penalized for committing crimes, for carjack. Whatever's going on.
Mayor Brandon Scott is trying to curb the juvenile crime crisis by enforcing the city's youth curfew. Enforcement will start in just a few days on Memorial Day weekend. The mayor has been tight-lipped about how enforcement will work, but we could learn more on Wednesday when city council members hold a hearing on the plan. Fox 45 News will be at that hearing and will bring you the updates both on air and online. Last week, Fox 45 News spoke with the leader of Shock Trauma's elite surgical team and 2 top pediatricians about juvenile violence. They say they're seeing more kids than ever fall victim to gun violence, and something needs to be done to stop it.
What I care about is getting to a place where there are fewer holes in a smaller number of people. Bring me a solution that leads to fewer holes in a smaller number of people. I'm all for it.
Every person living in Baltimore and the state of Maryland, regardless of how they feel about these issues, needs to recognize that we have an obligation and we have to start to make a difference, even if it's small steps.
Scan the QR code on your screen that you'll see, that it'll take you to Maxine's full conversation with shock trauma surgeons. You can also head to our website at foxbaltimore.com. While Governor Wes Moore did not sign many bills dealing with the juvenile crime crisis this year, he did sign Senate Bill 1, limiting where Marylanders with a wear and carry permit can bring their firearms in public. Now there's a battle heating up between Governor Wes Moore and a Severn man who opposes that bill. His form of protest, walking near a school bus with an AR-15. As Fox 45's Vincent Hill explains, neither side is backing down.
The governor says he was right in passing Senate Bill 1 because of people like Jaden McAdory. But McAdory says taking guns away from legal gun owners won't have the effect the governor wants. Governor Wes Moore standing firmly behind signing Senate Bill 1 into law, which limits where firearms can be carried. Fox 45 speaking with the governor while he was out and about at the Preakness on Saturday.
The number one priority and the number one focus that I have is I want to make sure that all Marylanders can feel safe in their own communities and feel safe in their own neighborhoods.
The new law receiving pushback from legal gun owners like Jaden McAdory, who's been openly carrying an AR-15 near a school bus stop in protest of the bill.
He's literally helping to make my point. People should not be able to carry whatever they want, wherever they want, to include bus stops and places around children.
McAdory firing back at the governor.
Until he knows the full story, I don't want to hear nothing he has to say. Never did I come out here for the children at all.
McAdory says Senate Bill 1 will only lead to disarming legal gun owners, leaving them helpless against criminals.
The legal criminals will always still have the guns. The legal guns will never disappear just because you take it away from people like me.
I mean, it's already illegal to shoot and kill people.
Devani Patterson of the group Peace agrees, calling Senate Bill 1 senseless.
They mentioned that it's common sense, legislation. Well, it's common sense that the, people committing these crimes are not obtaining guns legally.
However, political analyst John Deedy has a different take on McAdory's way of protesting the law.
Because if you're a parent, you may support the right to bear arms, but if your 7-year-old's getting off that school bus stop, you're scared.
They're extremely intimidated. They're terrified. They don't know what he's thinking or what he might do next.
Dede says McAdory's actions could lead to even stricter gun laws in the next legislative session.
This gentleman acting out or trying to get his 15 minutes of fame may create a situation now where the General Assembly says, we've got another spot, we want it next year.
Although Senate Bill 1 does prohibit guns at schools, it doesn't prohibit them at bus stops, meaning when that law goes into effect in October, he could actually still carry his AR-15 around kids. In Baltimore, Vincent Hill, Fox 45 News.
Senate Bill 1 was created in response to a U.S. Supreme Court decision ending Maryland's good and substantial reasoning requirement to get a wear and carry permit. While you no longer need to submit a reason to get a permit, the process of obtaining one is still pretty comprehensive. It includes registering online with the state, submitting fingerprints, going through 16 hours of training with state police or a qualified handgun instructor. It's 8 additional hours for renewal. After that, you also need to provide a passport-style photo, and then there's the fee, $75 for new applicants, $50 for renewal or subsequent licenses. And that brings us to our question of the day. Do you believe Senate Bill 1 will have an impact on crime? So far, 62% of voters say no. To weigh in. Another Preakness is in the books. Still ahead, we're wrapping up the races and taking a look at your Preakness style.
I'm Christine Frizzell with a look at yet another allegation of misconduct inside the FBI. The latest threat from Republicans.
And thinking ahead to the morning commute on our Monday, it looks like sunshine and some comfortable temperatures. Going to need those sunglasses. 59 at 6 a.m. into the 60s at 7 and 8. And by about 10 a.m. we're in the 70s. I'll let you know if we make another run at 80 tomorrow in my Weather Authority forecast.
Baltimore City police are investigating after they found a body in northwest Baltimore. Officials say the male body had signs of trauma. They are calling it a homicide. It's not clear when the man was killed. Police tell Fox 45 News they'll be able to provide more information after the medical examiner completes an autopsy. In Harford County, authorities are offering a $2,000 reward for information in the shooting of a 31-year-old woman. It happened just after midnight along Perrywood Court in Aberdeen. The victim was taken to shock trauma in Baltimore. She is expected to be okay. You can submit an anonymous tip on the Harford County Sheriff's website. Also in Aberdeen, 18 people are displaced after a massive fire ripped through multiple townhomes, causing an estimated $5 million in damage. Take a look at this. A viewer sent us these photos and videos of the smoke and flames. The state fire marshal says 3 homes collapsed and 1 firefighter was hurt, but is expected to be okay. Officials say the fire started in the rear of one of the middle units, but it's not clear what started it. The FBI is under fire, especially from Republicans, after a week of insight into its recent activities. It started on Monday when the Durham report was released, concluding the FBI did not have sufficient evidence to open a probe into then-candidate Donald Trump back in 2016. While Republicans have requested Durham to testify on Capitol Hill, Democrats are downplaying that report.
This is an investigation that started in a flawed manner. It was conducted in a flawed manner, and its conclusion is a flawed conclusion.
It is critical the American people understand how their government, their agencies have been turned on them, the taxpayer.
The FBI also accused of improperly using surveillance tools to spy on American citizens, including those involved in Black Lives Matter protests and the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol. Sinclair national correspondent Christine Frizzell has the story.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation says the proper changes have already been made to prevent a similar breach in the future. But lawmakers want to know why a surveillance tool used to gather intelligence on foreigners accused of breaking the law was used on American citizens more than 278,000 times, including January 6th riot suspects and those protesting the death of George Floyd back in 2020. The Washington Post reporting on the widespread abuse of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act between 2020 and 2021. Revelations that follow a series of others in the last week alone.
Do you swear or affirm under penalty or perjury?
3 FBI employees testifying they were retaliated against for speaking out about what they saw as wrongdoing at the Bureau.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong.
That hearing just days after Special Counsel John Durham's 4-year investigation concluded, looking into the FBI's probe into connections between the Trump campaign and Russia.
The Department of Justice, the FBI, and the media colluded to sell a false story that Donald Trump was a Russian agent and his campaign was being run by Russia. They ignored all the exculpatory evidence. The Durham report is damning.
House Republicans threatening to withhold federal funding for the FBI, including for a new headquarters top officials say they desperately need.
We have to exercise our authority, the power of the purse, to limit what the federal government, what the FBI and the Justice Department are doing to the American people.
Democrats argue it's all part of an extreme pressure campaign meant to boost Donald Trump's claims the federal government is weaponized against conservatives.
This is a really concerted effort to undermine Americans' confidence in the rule of law, in the Department of Justice, in the FBI.
Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, is set to expire at the end of this year and will need to be renewed by Congress. These latest revelations could make that reauthorization even tougher. I'm Christine Frizzau reporting.
All right, taking a beautiful look outside right now on our HD Inner Harbor camera. Toyota HD Inner Harbor camera showing us, again, a really comfortable evening with 64 now here in Baltimore under those clear skies. Winds out of the west at 3 miles an hour. Get outside, enjoy those last few minutes of the weekend on the patio. Humidity, 63% dew points, or the measure of moisture in the air, 51 degrees. That's pretty low still, and after some of the rain, actually, we saw just after Preakness yesterday, a gorgeous afternoon. Taking the humidity down, and right now we are continuing at 59 at Elkton, 64 here in Baltimore, 61 and Columbia, 62 down Laurel Way, some mid-60s right along the Chesapeake Bay. 80 degrees for a high in Baltimore today, made it up there to 81 at Westminster, 81 at Frederick, so a little bit above average this afternoon, and we will continue with this beautiful trend to welcome in the new work week as well. You see there's some rain that's off the coast. And then there's some showers and storms. You have to work your way out there towards Seattle and Boise. In fact, we've even got severe thunderstorm watches out that way, all the way down to Denver. So a lot of acreage with not a whole lot of rain. So the dry and nice weather continuing overnight into early tomorrow morning. Any storm systems, any weather makers pretty far away. Fair weather high pressure is really kind of our weather maker over the next couple of days. It stays warm and it stays clear. And really, there's not a whole lot of rain in the next 7 days in the 7-day forecast. But there's a couple of slim chances in there, which unfortunately for the gardens and things growing outside means you're probably going to have to water stuff because we are starting to turn abnormally dry, even portions of Anne Arundel County and Calvert County under a moderate drought at this point. And I think that's going to start worsening. Now through 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. Looks like temperature settling down into the 50s, refreshing. And then for tomorrow afternoon, we do it all over again. Back to the mid-70s. Get outside, enjoy a nice outdoor lunch after sunglasses in the morning. Keep those sunglasses for the PM commute home as we make it to near 80 degrees. 54, mostly clear tonight. Tomorrow, 80 degrees, partly cloudy skies next 7 days. For Tuesday, clouds and sun, 76. Slim chance of a sprinkler shower late Wednesday night. That'll lead in somewhat cooler air, but still dry Thursday, Friday. That's about average for this time of year, if not a little below. PM shower or two Saturday of next weekend, and a stray shower on Sunday, 74, but no rain, chances above 20% at least in those next 7 days. Enjoy.
The 148th running of the Preakness Stakes is in the books. Famed trainer Bob Baffert's national treasure crossed the finish line first. Dashing Kentucky Derby winner made his chances at a Triple Crown sweep. We've been getting in some great photos from our viewers enjoying yesterday's events, like this one from Eve. Pretty in pink with a matching hat. Of course, you can't go to Preakness without that. For Lauren, Preakness was a family affair. She went to the races with her parents and friends. I love the color of that blazer. And check this out. Even people who couldn't make it to Pimlico got in on the fun. Cynthia sent us this group of nurses bringing smiles to patients' faces with those pretty fancy hats. Stay with Fox 45 News. Morgan Atsit and Rocco DeSangro will have a complete recap of the Preakness Stakes coming up in Sports Unlimited. And the clock is ticking for lawmakers to raise the debt ceiling before the nation defaults on its debts. What to expect in the week ahead? And still ahead, student artists work to help animals in need. How an art show benefiting the SPCA is helping kids too. Tomorrow, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy will meet with President Joe Biden about the debt limit. While speaking on Fox News today, the speaker blamed the recent breakdown in talks on progressive lawmakers.
So do you think Bernie Sanders is among those leading this for the president?
Well, the president, he really wags the dog. I mean, when Bernie Sanders or AOC says something, the White House shifts to the other way.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz made similar claims, accusing the president of, quote, handing his entire agenda over to the radical left. He also called on the president to accept the House GOP's proposal to lift the debt limit in exchange for spending cuts. Senator Bernie Sanders appearing on MSNBC as those two made their remarks, Sanders dismissing their comments and reiterating claims that the GOP proposal only benefits the nation's wealthy.
Well, I doubt that very much, but to the degree that the White House says to these Republicans, stop your hypocrisy, stop defending the billionaire class from paying their fair share of taxes while you want to cut programs that the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor need. If I have any role, if progressives have any role in that, that's great.
Staff-level talks on the debt ceiling resumed today after falling apart Friday night. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says if lawmakers don't raise the debt limit by June 1st, the nation will default on its debts. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is responding to the NAACP's travel advisory discouraging potential tourists from visiting this state. The civil rights group issuing the advisory yesterday, claiming Governor DeSantis' policies are, quote, openly hostile to Black Americans. The statement cites several of Republican governors' laws, including a bill he signed last week banning colleges from spending public funds on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. DeSantis denounced the move as a political stunt when Florida's NAACP branch made similar claims in March. His press secretary doubled down on that stance this weekend while responding to the organization on Twitter. A new kind of land grab is going on across the country, and it might surprise you why China is buying up millions of acres here in the U.S. in tonight's Full Measure report. Across the country, there's a new kind of land grab going on that may surprise you. Millions of acres are being bought up by foreign investors, including those from one of our biggest adversaries, China. And no state is more impacted than Texas, where Scott Thuman reports for Full Measure.
Southwest Texas.
Out past the oil derricks and cattle ranches, as you approach the Mexican border, you find scrubby ground that's hard to work. But even in a place the locals call the middle of nowhere, land is in high demand, like these 140,000 acres bought in 2018 by a billionaire from America's #1 international rival. The Chinese real estate tycoon who bought it for millions of dollars said he wanted to build giant wind turbines to sell power to the Texas grid.
I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong that any country that is an adversary of the United States should have the right to buy anything in the United States.
As a direct result of the wind power plan, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a law preventing other nations and companies of certain hostile countries from owning or having access to the state's critical infrastructure, including the power grid. Still, some think Texas needs to go further. Republican Senator Lois Kolkhorst pushed a new, stricter law banning anyone from countries the U.S. identifies in its national threat assessment, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and yes, China, from buying any Texas property.
This is about protecting our homeland and saying that, Texas is a strategic state in our nation, and that we need to hit the pause button and make sure that we know what's going on.
18 states currently have some form of restrictions for foreign ownership of land, but the rules and penalties vary widely. In Washington, a committee on foreign investment, known as CFIUS, reviews and can block foreign purchases and investments, but it doesn't have jurisdiction over all property deals.
It concerns me long term because if we do wind up in a war with China, for whatever reason, and they control our supply chain, they control our food chain, they control our electrical chain, all they got to do is flip a switch, and America's in trouble.
Now more states are considering restrictions on foreign ownership of land, and there are calls for the federal government to do a much better job of tracking exactly who owns what. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman.
You can watch Full Measure with Cheryl Atkinson Sundays on Fox 45 at 10 in the morning. Break out the brooms. The O's sweep their series with the Blue Jays in Toronto. Who stepped up in the win? Coming up next on Sports Unlimited. 48 Baltimore area schools are partnering with the Maryland SPCA to help animals. Students from those schools submitted artwork for the 10th annual Kindness for Paws art show at the White Marsh Mall. The community had the opportunity to buy the students' art. All proceeds go to support animal shelters. Organizers say it doesn't just help the animals, it's good for the students too.
Many of these young people, this might be the first time their art has ever been displayed. And I think it's also important for our community to remember art is extremely important. It helps kids to develop so many different skills. And on top of that, again, they are teaching our community about kindness to animals, about adopting from shelters and how important that is.
You can also buy digital downloads of the artwork. You can find a link to the art on our website, foxbaltimore.com/newslinks. That's all the news for you at 10 o'clock. I'm Mackenzie Frost. Thank you so much for watching. Morgan Adsit and Rocco DeSangro join us now with Sports Unlimited. Morgan, Rocco, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Mackenzie. Coming up tonight on Sports Unlimited, the Orioles are still chasing the Rays while all others are chasing those two teams.
The Birds got to 30-plus wins after Brandon Hyde emptied his bench as the O's swept the Blue Jays.
A golden run for National Treasure in the 148th running of the Preakness Stakes, and a day filled with celebration and tragedy for the horse's Hall of Fame trainer.
OBJ was in town yesterday for the Preakness. Does that mean he's staying for this week's start of voluntary team workouts courtesy OTAs?
Well, if he goes, he'll probably see these two guys. Could be a breakout season for two former high school teammates. Now with the Ravens, why the pair may have Dr. Rush to thank. Coming up next on Sports Unlimited.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sports Unlimited. He's Rocco DeSangro, Morgan Adsit. 1 year ago today, the Orioles rebuild became a reality with the arrival of Adley Rutschman to the show. We'll get to the O's and Preakness 148 recaps in just a bit.
Yeah, Morgan, what a day that was. First up, the Final Four is set in college lacrosse with Johns Hopkins men looking to punch a ticket to the semifinals. Let's get to that. Trip to the Final Four on the line for the Blue Jays, and it was a battle to the finish with Notre Dame. Johns Hopkins down 4-3 in the second. Russell Melendez has been so good all year long. The former Archbishop Spalding standout ties the game at 4. But every time Johns Hopkins got close, Notre Dame would